All right. Hello, everyone. This is Justice with Jax. We are in season 4. This is episode 5, and it is May 1st, 2026. Happy May Day. And so, as usual, we start our podcast episodes out with the countdown of since when the case Armendariz versus City of Colorado Springs was filed by the ACLU, which today brings us to 1,005 days, or 2 years, 9 months, 1 day. And you are so lucky. Again, we just meet the coolest people doing this job. So we have a wonderful guest who is actually based beyond El Paso County. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Hand the mic.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jax. My name is Andrés Alvarez. I am currently living in the city and county of Denver, so deep in the heart of the center of the state. My pronouns are he, him, his, él as well. And my current affiliation, so I'm actually starting up a law and policy firm with a friend called Vanguard Law and Policy, also Vanguard Collective, which ideally is we're trying to change the game in terms of how litigants and how lawyers kind of see themselves in this work, as well as finding a much more sustainable approach, so that we can kind of look beyond what a lot of people in the industry would call like golden handcuffs, and actually use their powers for good and not using these powers to pay that student loan debt, which is there for a reason, right? Like these things are all
Yes.
interconnected. So we're trying
Systemic
to,
issues.
yeah, so we're trying to kind of flip the script and hey, there's a way to do this while still being true to the things that probably inspired you to get into this anyways, and actually start using those powers the way that you were hoping to when you were applying to law school, right? To whatever time you're at now.
I love that. And there's a fun connection which we're going to get into, but uh technically this is how we met, being fellow creators and podcast hosts. So let's give a plug to your project, Andres.
Yeah. So I am the host and producer of Sithty Minutes. It is a play off of 60 Minutes. So, as the name implies, we are a Star Wars and politics podcast, where we try and kind of incorporate the issues of each week, whatever's kind of the big story, trying to find a way to connect it to Star Wars because, unlike the real world, we have full, complete arcs and we can see kind of the emotional beats or the things that need to happen in Star Wars for the good guys to win the day. So it gives ideas and puts us in the mindset of, well, how do we solve for it here in the real world?
I love that. Yeah, the real world can be a little bit disappointing sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk about Star Wars when it comes to that. And so, as usual on this show, using it as an educational vehicle and bringing in community voices, just sharing that, we've had back to back episodes. So, yay, we're on track for the schedule now. And so, that doesn't mean there's lots of updates in the case since we've been going back to back, but this is a reminder that where we're at was that the ACLU in February issued a statement about the case, which the headline is, the federal appeals court finds the city of Colorado Springs and local police cannot avoid responsibility for unlawfully searched activists. And what that really means in terms of process, since we have a legal eagle on the podcast as well, we'll talk more process, but we're in wait mode, which is part of the legal system, right? And so there are two deadlines that the defendants, which is, I always remind people, that is the government here. That's the city of Colorado Springs and the U.S. government or the FBI. They have choices around filing a petition for rehearing from the within the 10th Circuit's U.S. Court of Appeals, and that deadline is May 27. There's also a deadline for the defendants to file what is called a petition for writ of certiorari. That is June 10th, and what that means is they have the right to ask the Supreme Court to hear this case. So, wow. Yeah, no shortage of news, but Andres, part of why this podcast exists is that people in Colorado Springs, for sure, are interested in following this story about the case that ACLU filed on my behalf. And, I think folks beyond Colorado Springs, even. So, can I check in with you? And we're going to talk about more how we met in a second. But, when did you first hear about this case? And what did you think? Maybe it's when we met. Sometimes people hear about the case before they meet me, which is always interesting. So, as a bit of a legal eagle, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. First of all, the case is so important because of what it can establish, right? Like when we talk about the opinions of judges and the decisions that come from a court, we're also talking about the type of precedent that creates for similar types of situations. So when I had heard about the case through us initially meeting and just kind of doing my research before you came on the podcast about like, okay, who is this? What are
Because that's what a
the
good
kinds of things
producer
we can talk
does.
about? Exactly. You got to know who you're talking to, or else it's going to be an hour of what's your favorite color. But
Yeah.
learning about the case and seeing the facts of it, we're talking about behavior that has kind of been the MO, right, for folks who were in different kind of movement and protest work. There was constant chatter, I can think of as early as like 2015, 2016 to now, of folks just kind of feeling, if you're going to a protest, there were a lot of folks who would like, maybe put their phone in airplane mode. Like there was this constant like, hey, best practice is only bring the things you need. Like if you don't need your smartwatch, don't bring it. If you don't need the $800 camera,
Right.
like all these things that could be taken or that hold your information.
Right. Allow you to be surveilled, essentially, right?
Right, right. So, the things that you are arguing and the decisions that the case is bringing forth and like the issues that the courts have to weigh are not only important for the time, but also important for the democratic norms that we have, right? Like this sets
Truly.
the stage for how much can you actually exercise your First Amendment in a way that, the Jimmy Kimmel fights earlier, like I'm just thinking of
Right.
headlines where people were like, oh no, our First Amendment's like, sure, if ABC can't air a certain show, that is definitely a step in the wrong direction. But like, if you can't even physically be at a protest because the government is already surveilling you, and then they use that as an opportunity to like step in and just take what they want, you can't really exercise your First Amendment, right? Like, best you can
Right.
do is tweet angrily or post on Blue Sky in all
Well, and even
caps.
then, they'll use that against you, right? Which is
Right.
the argument of the violation of the First Amendment here, which is being surveilled. Them, it's not illegal for them to look at our public posts. It is illegal for them to criminalize you for your political speech, and those are some of the threads that are at issue here with this case.
Yeah. So, seeing all of those pieces, it just makes it super important. And, knowing that, with Trump, we still have X amount of years. I'm not thinking about it
Too
offhand.
long. Just note
Yeah.
it is too long. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like protesting and what happens showing up there is just an issue that we know is going to be front of mind for a lot of people in the coming years, weeks, months, etc. As different things come across our feeds. But the other piece is, when you were on the podcast, we had talked about how you were also working for, like, you had federal property as well at the time for
Yeah.
what you're doing with folks. So, it's again showing the brazenness. Like that's just a fact of the case in here as well. Of like this is a lot of property, and some of it is personally yours, and some of it you're just personally responsible for, and they took it all anyways.
Yes.
So it also raises these questions of, what can people do with your work stuff? And again, for some people, that cuts a certain way, but like for more, dare I say, upper class folks that are in these kind of cushy government jobs, like you're holding on to information that is also either the people's information or information that like must be kept private because of the nature of your work. So, if a lawyer shows up at a protest and speaks out, are all their clients' files
Now
that are
subject.
at the home office or whatnot, or, tied to the personal computer? Because we have blurred that line now with technology of like a
Right.
personal account and a work account on the same computer.
Hmm.
There's a lot of instances, doctors, right? Like anyone who has a privilege of information. So it touches on a
Absolutely.
lot.
Yes, exactly. And, you said a key word for me, which is precedent. And that is part of what has been deeply meaningful and motivational for me is that this is bigger than me. It's bigger than this community in terms of, setting legal precedents to protect our democracy, you know? And, I think you said it well too that identifying, like, at the time, I was a staffer for Senator Michael Bennett's office, and my gut tells me that the outsized reaction that law enforcement had, the PD here specifically, is I have maintained that I think that was a reaction to learning that I am a political actor, right? I was part of a political office for the senior Democrat in Colorado. And so my gut tells me that that was part of the the conduct that police chose to take in violation of my civil rights. So, the journey continues and it really matters because it sets precedent and we have to keep fighting for our democracy despite these really challenging times, which if you love Star Wars, like hell yeah, the rebels are here and the resistance is here and we'll keep fighting. And so I want to share with folks too. I kind of love how we connected and now we're doing like cross collaboration. I've been on your show, you've been on my show. And here's the beautiful thing, you all. It was through social media, like Blue Sky, because that's where the people who kind of want to retire from social media but can't entirely. That's where we live because we can't be on Twitter and be complicit with fascism, nor are we choosing Facebook for the same reasons. And so I was so excited to have a real life connection with someone in, my Colorado community through social media, which has been super positive. Now you're on my show. I think it's so cool and we need to amplify those moments for people that like, hey, good things can happen even if it's
Yeah.
social media. And so when we were interacting, it was a like a random political discussion, right? It was something with regard to one of the assemblies that had just happened like in the Denver metro, I think, and I just happened to see it. I think maybe we follow the same guy and then we got in on this thread and I just so appreciate your kindness and felt seen. And then we started talking. Boom. That's beautiful. And so when I saw you, I immediately loved the idea of a Colorado based podcast combining Star Wars and politics when it came across you. And then I was super stoked to discover that you're also a fellow Latino, a fellow English Spanish speaker. So I want to give you some shine. I would love to hear the origin story of your podcast and what led you to this thoughtful and fun project.
Yeah, for sure. So the kind of first inspiration was around the first Trump presidency. I'd always been kicking this idea of like
Hmm.
Star Wars being inherently political. Like I'm a Star Wars nerd, but I'm also a film nerd. So I was like
Hmm.
watching the behind the scenes and listening to
Yeah.
interviews with George Lucas. So the rebels being the Viet Cong and the U.S. Military being
Mm.
represented by the Empire was one of those interview nuggets from Lucas that I had held on to since my teenage years. But
Yeah.
Trump really changed the equation because his campaign and he himself like kept showing these moments of being very culturally aware of the world.
Mm.
Like they always knew what kind of cutesy tagline or
Right. Look
like
at them
pop
now
culture.
with all their
Right.
memes and AI images. My God.
Absolutely. That's the evolution, but even then they
Hmm.
were just really good at like a quippy, post somewhere on the internet that would grab people's attention. And in the mix of all of those, stupid little reactions or comparisons, they would sneak in a Star Wars reference. But there was one particular post where they mentioned that
I remember, yeah.
they're the Rebel Alliance and they welcomed Gina Carano when she got first let go from The Mandalorian for mocking pronouns, coincidentally. Like, huge public fit about it because Pedro Pascal kept asking her to just use proper pronouns because he does have a trans family member. And she just refused to do it, so Disney let her go. So they welcomed her to the rebellion, which like was a first red flag for me because I'm like, if you don't know, that's literally, they would never welcome someone like that to the rebellion in Star Wars. And then during the 2020 campaign, they made another comment where they said that their campaign that they were building was like the Death Star. And, they got ratioed in the comments with folks being like, it blows up, right? Like, they literally finish it, and a few weeks later, it's just gone.
Yeah, this is not the win you think it is.
Yeah, but they use the gif of the Death Star firing its laser, which also, it's like, one, crappy metaphor, the thing gets blown up.
Yeah.
But then two, the image that they used for it is turning on the laser, which again, if you know Star Wars, like, they don't turn it on and like restore democracy to someone. They turn it on once in the movie and it just obliterates a planet.
Yeah,
And they're
genocide?
doing it.
Yikes.
Yeah, and they're doing it to be petty and like put pressure on Leia. So it's like even the subcontext, like just on paper, absolute annihilation of a people, and then even like the ends justify the means calculus is like, oh yeah, and they're also just like rubbing it in Leia's face. So like those two moments for me was like, okay, either the Trump campaign knows what it's doing and it's riling people up and being purposely wrong, or
Yeah.
two, which I think it's more of the mix, like 60
Yeah.
40, is that they don't
I don't
understand
get it.
the values of the franchise. And it's like, no, you wouldn't be on the rebellion, you would be on the empire. And like, if you wanted to view yourself as the rebellion, here are like their actual kind of ethics, like Leia would
Yeah.
not stand for someone in the rebellion misgendering another pilot because it's like, we need that pilot. And if their pronouns are XY, whatever their pronouns are, like, that's what it
We're
is.
going to respect
'Cause-
it.
yeah, because we're all fighting for the same thing, which is liberation. So I'll be damned if you're oppressing a pilot in the station. So
Yeah.
once 2020 ended, that's when we launched in 21. And the whole premise was not only kind of schooling Republicans who are not getting the franchise, but then also helping folks who are dedicated, like, just lore nerds, being able to say, like, oh, hey, Star Wars has faced this problem, and here's how they kind of broke down through it, or things to keep in mind, and then here's how we can move forward, or things that we can be mindful of as we try to implement that in the real world. So, yeah, it's been sitting in the back of the noggin for a while, but the Trump campaign, like most of us, right? There was just something
They
about it
sparked
that,
something.
yeah, yeah. And I was in Florida getting my undergraduate degree at Florida State when Trayvon Martin had been shot and killed. And I remember even as a undergraduate student, we did a sit-in with the Dream Defenders inside of the then Governor Rick Scott's office to
Yep.
try and get him to, meet the moment with some kind of reform, or at least the reimagining and rethinking about what vigilante violence and what this kind of cop culture has created in Florida, especially with Stand Your Ground. Unsuccessful, but it's like it
That
wasn't
doesn't mean.
until then that I was like doing more things out in the world, and then something about the Trump campaign put me in like, oh, I don't like, I guess I'm gonna get into this other gear of like, it's not enough to be at the sit-ins and talk, in community. It's like, I just need to put this on the internet because, yeah,
I'm going to
I'll
speak
I'll
my
be
truth.
damned. I'll be damned if Republicans keep being like, we're the rebellion. I'm like, you're not, like, Andor
Clearly.
would mop the floor with half of you, but like, no, you
Yeah.
wouldn't even get through the front door, right? Like, all these Star Wars characters would just like look through the peephole and be like, what's the password? And when they don't even know the password. It's like, this is how far off the trail
They
you
don't
are.
get it.
So
Yeah, no, that's such a strong link, right? Like they don't get it. They don't get Star Wars and they don't get democracy. And like you said, it's kind of a mix, 60-40. Like, do they intentionally don't get it or do they just like ignorantly don't get it? And it's
right.
actually both. And I love what you said around, as a student engaging in the protests, that's again free speech, right? We're talking about that. And like with a rebel mindset, going in there knowing that, it may not have the outcome that you want, but it is still worthy of defending and fighting. And that's why I've always loved Star Wars because that rebel integrity, I'll even say, of like, right, like we're fighting for the liberation of the galaxy, like hell yeah.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate knowing kind of the background of your passion project, I would say, as my podcast is too, and a kinship with you, and that, we both got to a point and there has been times in my inner monologue where I'm like, that's weird, but I guess I can thank Trump for that. I guess we can both, in a way, thank Trump
Yeah.
for moving us to such an extent that we are committed to speaking truth to power with the vehicles that we have. And I'm just really impressed with, the number of episodes you've had, the guests that you've had, which are Colorado political figures. And I just truly appreciate another voice diving into that political piece because man, I feel like we're in election cycle already, and it almost never stops in America. Like it's
Yeah.
different in other countries. And what I know of your background too is that you and I think you mentioned it right. You work at the Capitol. You were in the political mix. And so that's part of our kinship, right? We started our connection over Colorado politics, and I think part of it was commenting on my race, which I shared, I think, on your show, but we have shared publicly that our campaign filed a complaint with the Colorado Democratic Party about El Paso County Dems denying a ballot review to our campaign, which is pretty standard, and so CDP has since affirmed that we should be granted a ballot review. However, what has been really troubling is that in their decision, they also essentially condoned by refusing to move forward with our complaint, like investigating it or any other process. Our committee witnessed the county party chair here calling another voter a rapist without regard to any of the factual circumstances and hostility toward me as a candidate, which we reported as conduct issues. And then the CDP has chosen to not have any process around our other report of the county party sharing a confidential email from our campaign with another campaign, which is a pretty wild outcome that we've witnessed. And honestly, Andres, it's breaking news that happened this morning. We got the reply from the CDP chair saying we're not going to really, the complaint is done. We're not saying anything about neutrality or conduct, which is disappointing. Like politics is a rough road.
Yeah.
And today is May Day, also known as International Workers' Day. So we're going to get into a little bit more of that context. But I would love your thoughts as a politically minded person who works at the state capitol about this moment that we're in. We are seeing this, I think, renaissance, I might say, around like workers' rights and new developments around accountability, right? Where we had the congressman in California who recently resigned because it was revealed that he was a predator. And so we are in the chaos mix. And how does a rebel handle times of chaos? If we're going to reference the Star Wars mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing, it's funny because it's something you brought up earlier, Jax, of, you know, having a long-term mindset and making sure that we are thinking about what happens after the midterms, right? Like after these big political moments, because, for example, in the legislature right now, there's a bill to get rid of the second union vote that only Colorado
Oh,
really
right.
does. Because the initial vote, for those who don't know the union process, you have your initial vote where you're choosing to unionize the workplace. A simple majority technically gets you in there, but ideally, most folks are like, you want like two-thirds to just kind of smooth things
Show
over.
the power. Yeah.
Right. So if you can get past 51, absolutely run the numbers up. But in Colorado, we have a second vote where that is where you're actually agreeing to allow contract negotiations and to be for that workplace to actually be represented and pay dues for that organization that you're unionizing under. That vote by Colorado law has to be 75%. So it kind of takes that
It,
ideal dream situation for unionizing your workplace, and they're basically saying do it twice. Do it
right.
the first time to agree
Because the
to be
first time isn't
unionized, and
hard
another
enough.
time.
Sorry.
Right, right. And and the workplace can set that date, so it's like it's not even like that vote happens a week or two down the road, like a playoff game where it's like, okay, we'll see you in 3 days, and we'll do this again. It's like the employer can drag their feet on it and do 2, 3, 4 months, and in that middle time between the two elections, you have agreed to be unionized, but you don't have any of the protections actually in place. So that bill, it actually got passed out of the legislature last
Ooh,
year, but Polis vetoed it. And
that guy.
that bill is back and it has moved through the House and the Senate. But it's Polis's last year. There's literally no reason for him
He's
to sign it.
he's a lame duck, right?
Right. He's a lame duck. He's leaving. So we're making inroads, right? Like to me, that tells me like, hey, this bill not only is like being presented today in 2026, but it passed out of both chambers in 2025.
Right.
So that fight has already we've kind of built the machinery to get it done. If they get it to the governor's desk again this year, then that's two for two. So
So,
it's kind of
I'm
building
sorry, it's
that.
good.
No, yeah, because now it's all that's left is the governor, and even if Polis doesn't change his mind in a year, that election is coming up. So how do we, talk to those leaders and start building up that rapport of saying like, hey, what are your thoughts on this specific legislation? Because the legislature's already moving it; it just needs a signature now. So are you that person, or do we need to find someone else?
Oh, well said.
And
Yes.
those, yeah, because we're
Hold them
that's the other thing for
accountable.
voters. We're their bosses. It doesn't feel like
Exactly.
it, but we are their bosses.
That's right. And so this is where sometimes, cue for the audience. As Andres said, we have gubernatorial candidates who, if you support workers' rights, because if you're listening, you're probably a worker, working class folks, we have a kinship. And so make sure that you are asking these candidates about this legislation and give people the words when they talk to Michael Bennett or Phil Weiser or Scott Bottoms, I guess. Um,
Hey, that could be your representative, for better or worse.
right. But I want to riff a little bit too, is that what's cool about May Day, interestingly, is that, it has a global and cultural and historic significance. And I've been noticing, like this year, very interesting to me was that the groups organizing in opposition of authoritarianism in our country right now, today there's even been a call to not go to work, not go to school, not spend money to create an economic and political protest. And, I'm heading to my community's May Day event later to collect signatures for the petition to get a graduated income tax that only affects people who make $500 million or $500,000 or more a year, because Colorado has currently a flat state income tax. And so I'm looking forward to talking to people today on May Day on behalf of the working class. How do we tax the rich and get them really to pay their fair share? These are just kind of basics, which to me, like the legislation that we were just talking about, workers' rights to me are basic, right? Like we can go much further than the basic rights and truly create protections and equity. And then just want to say quickly for those listening, because this is a podcast for nerds, absolutely, is that you know May Day actually can refer to kind of what is a seasonal celebration around gathering flowers, and we dance and sing, and it's the beginning of summer, which hell yeah, we're gonna do that too. But right now, and Andres, I'd love your insights on this as well, is that what I have always found interesting around um, like know your labor history, like that is something we should all pay attention to. And so when it comes to May Day and how the United States interacts with it, it is so interesting to me because internationally, it is embraced as Workers' Day. And yet, in the United States, historically, this is going back to like the late 1800s. Here in the United States, political leaders essentially sought to erase the May Day's labor movement origins. And so now, because we wanted, well, those in power at the time wanted kind of a less radical honoring of working folk. And so that's why in the United States we have Labor Day in September. So since we're talking on the subject of labors, like hell yeah, workers unite. Andres, what more about that, kind of context would you add or that you may have found interesting? Because again, as rebel-minded folks, power to the people.
Yeah, so I think I would add like May Day and kind of workers. The story of workers in the United States is the story of people who are marginalized and pushed to the roots. Like
Mm,
they are in the kind of U.S. project, right? It was initially slavery, right? Like the cheapest
mm.
slavery you can find, and the least unionized and least organized in that sense. Now in the current era, right, it's like the places that need organized labor the most are the most exploited because they have no union protections, are like people in the gig economy, right? Like they're routinely kind of working for pennies.
It's why I
But
refuse. I opt out. I encourage people to not Grubhub or DoorDash because to me it is exploitive of workers.
yeah, but the other piece is that because it's tied to these marginalized identities, like a thing about labor and union power is that it really connects all of us because all of us have been marginalized throughout kind of the history. But the thing that ties us is the ability to actually provide for either ourselves, our family groups, the communities that we're connected in. Like this scales up. But it's tied to, as we know, May Day today, being tied to Black history as well. The
Mm.
first May Day in 1886 was in Chicago, with their unionist reformers, socialist anarchists, and other workers that they had
The
organized at that point.
radicals.
Yeah, all those radicals out there. So it's like a town like Chicago, for those who haven't been, extremely diverse, right? Between Spanish influence and in terms of Mexicans, Salvadorians, Guatemalans, kind of in that space. You've got your Midwestern white folks,
Right.
as well
Illinois.
as you've got just a lot of black influence, and that from the diaspora comes from all
Hmm.
sorts of different angles, whether it be immigrants or folks that have been born and escaped to the north
Hmm.
from the slavery impacts that have been in this country that have pushed large migration patterns. So like May Day comes out of this event and out of this town that has always been what happens when a bunch of different cultures have to start mingling and mixing together. And turns out it's equal protections is one of the things that all of those three different groups ended up agreeing on back then as soon as all
Hmm.
of this started. So, yeah, I think just reminding folks of labor is a part of identity, and it's something that makes it easier to bridge connections that would be harder to do normally. Like that's the other piece because it's so hard to build that community and build that change if you can't build bridges with folks. Like, you need that for coalition building. So I like to think of celebrating labor and people power, because if we don't understand that we all need that, then it becomes very hard to push for anything, because you'll only get the people who are already on the same page as you, which may or may not be a majority.
Indeed. No, well put, because often I like to interject and remind people and a little bit more radical way to say it, but like, no war but class war. And what I mean with that is that the majority of us are closer to experiencing a crisis or hardship that would cause us to be homeless than the, sliver of wealthy who have an outsized amount of the capital and assets in our society, as well as power. And, that's what we're really painfully seeing, confronted with right now in our American Democratic Republic. And I would love your thoughts on this, if we can riff some more too, about both, the word oligarchy, I think, being like one of the new buzzwords of, the past couple years, in a sad way, I'll say, because we recognize this outsized power of the wealthy class. And, I've mentioned before, especially in the candidate journey, where I think it's important to remind folks that, to me, Democrat, Republican, the two-party system can function as a distraction from the fact that we, the majority, the working class people of America, will be in a continued struggle to essentially protect ourselves from oppression with regard to these wealthy interests that use the political system to maintain their power. And put a finer point on it, definitely a more critical point of view. You and we are, as rebels, we, are on the left part of the spectrum, and there are factions within that spectrum, right, where arguments are that even our own state party chair has been labeled as defending kind of corporate interests, because right now we have a few Democrats at the state legislature who are under ethics investigations with regard to some of the, let's say, goodies that they accepted from a particular entity. And what was really disappointing to me was seeing the state party chair basically pick up the slack for those ethics investigations by saying that the entity that prompted those investigations, they're from outside of Colorado, so what they have to say doesn't matter. And I was like, it does if it regards ethics violations. And so all that is to say, this shit is complicated. Let's hear your perspective, Andres, on that.
Yeah, so I think like oligarchy being kind of the buzzword is really also an important part, because it helps us name what's going on. And I think the thing that's lost in these conversations is what we need to do when we're talking about oligarchy, and what we need to do when we're talking about how the current political system plays out, is reminding folks of like the scale of money that we're talking about. Like, you had mentioned in our earlier conversations when we first met of, the reporting, right, can be tied to like, oh, well, this person has 20 million and this person has 4 million. And yeah, those, one's bigger than the other, but like 22 million is a big number, right? Six million is a huge number. And there's a lot of things you can do with that money. But we don't have a frame of it to understand what is 6 million in terms of this payment. And of course, these are smaller, maybe sometimes high profile races, but President is in the hundreds of millions. State office, if you're going for
Harris
U.S. Congress, is
set a
millions.
record, right? Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt. Harris set a
yeah.
record, which did it get to billion? I think was that the record? Yeah,
If it wasn't, it was very close to it.
right.
But, we're talking just large sums of money. So reminding folks that when we're talking about oligarchy, we're talking about people who have the kind of money to spend. Like our fun money, right, is like the Chili's 2 for $20 and like maybe some unlimited refills. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
Yes.
and then maybe like once or twice a year, right, we all have that like, let's go get, I don't know, like a fancy steak or something. Like our fun money is that. Other people's fun money is like, I'm going to donate the maximum amount allowable to both the Democratic and the Republican
Yep.
candidate so that whoever wins, I get one of the first meetings and I get to talk about, hey, here's what I'm curious about doing. And that's their pocket money, right? Like that's their Chili's 2 for $20. And the more that we can make those comparisons and remind people of like when we're talking about taxing folks to pay for public services, when we're talking about using this money to help pay for Medicaid or help pay for improving our school infrastructure, actually owning our schools, all of these different kind of policy issues that show up. The argument that kind of hijacks the conversation is like, oh, like what are these rich people going to do if they get taxed more because like they need this money or they've made it and earned it. It's like the things they're using it for right now is for their eighth jet, their 12th yacht, and like the next 8 elections that they care about who's in office. Notice none of that was where their next meal's coming from. If they have a bed, even then, if we drill down, it's like they have 8 beds that they're choosing between which one they want to sleep on.
I was gonna
We are
say they
lucky to
got a
have
second
one.
home in Aspen.
Right, right. And those aren't even we're not even talking celebrities here, right? We're talking about people who live and work inside of your state, wherever you're listening, Colorado or otherwise. So, like, we're already beyond the point of, oh, well, they need that money to survive. Like, no, the things they're concerned about is the next Lamborghini or, like, getting a new Audi or whatever. And it's like, that's not real human concerns. Like it's a concern for someone. I don't want to invalidate that, but
Sure.
it's not the same as like, oh, we have to eat chicken for a month because it's the only meat we can afford. Like that
Right.
versus do I want the Ferrari in red or black are like two different worlds of conversations. And
Truly.
yeah.
And
So like the when we drill in on oligarchs, when we drill in on like, corporate controlled politics, like I think that's the one drumbeat we have to keep hitting on of like, hey, it'll be okay if, Apple can't spend $200 million in lobbying for something. Because that 200 million could feed X amount of people, right? It could
yes.
insert policy idea here.
Right. I mean, it's fundamentally an issue of fairness, and that's why, I'm a human being. Was it a total fucking heartbreaker that, my campaign didn't get advanced? Absolutely. And I will tell you what part of what is has gotten me through is this spark of like, fuck yeah, taxing the rich is exactly what we should be talking about right now. So I'm happy to be collecting signatures to get that question on the ballot for Colorado voters to decide this November. I'm very confident that it's going to make it on the ballot because I feel like people are at their like pain threshold with this issue. And you mentioned, that and sometimes in my conversations, I'm like, if you're worried about your buddies making $500,000 or more a year, here's the chart for what that looks like. And to your point, we've got to break the mindset around like, oh, well, those people are the jobs creators, and so if they get impacted, this trickle down bullshit. No, the impact really more likely is they're just going to have to get the standard Lamborghini. They're not going to be able, they may not
Right.
feel that they can afford the high end trim version. Like
Yeah.
these are issues of fairness that, with our social contract, yes, the government is in a position to navigate, right?
Yeah.
And I
I
think
mean,
I
like,
would,
I
so go ahead.
to like put a finer point on it, or like another real world example is like Jeff Bezos recently got remarried and bought out a town in Europe that he
Yep.
got to use the town as
Mm-hmm.
his like wedding location, as well as the reception and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And if he didn't have that money, he would still get married, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he could still easily
Go to the
afford the
courthouse for,
nicest venue.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like if he couldn't buy a town, he'd still probably be getting married in like, I don't know,
Yeah.
Sagrada Familia in Spain and like with all
Yeah.
that beautiful glasswork. Like he could still afford a nice wedding. That's not an issue here. But not only did he do that, but he is someone who is constantly, having little dinners with Trump and like buying
Mm-hmm.
little things here and there, and Amazon, bending the knee here and there
Mm-hmm.
for the Trump administration. It's like, one, this man could get married still, so like tax him for that. Like he should not have that kind of free money floating around to buy a
Mm-hmm.
town. And then two, would people like Trump even care about politics if there weren't people like Jeff Bezos running around? If there wasn't
Mm-hmm.
a quadrillionaire floating
Mm-hmm.
around that has thoughts about what they think the tax rate should be, like
In a
people
way
like
for
Trump
him
would
to
not be in
grift.
office. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like some of the scummiest people in politics would have no interest, because there's better ways to con people out of money
Mm-hmm.
than like, hey, what's your idea about what we should tax the rate at? Thank you for this $20 million dinner. Um, like
Yeah.
Trump wouldn't exist. The White House would not seem enticing to
Mm-hmm.
him,
Mm-hmm.
because the titans of industries are still only making like 500,000 or whatever. It's estimated in Denver you need about $85,000 to live comfortably, and they define that as having like a one-bedroom apartment, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to like have two or three like comfort meals a week that are going out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need someone making $20 million a second. It's just not needed. They could make 500,000 and still be living a very cushy life in a
Right.
place like Denver. So
Right. These are
tax
just
them,
facts.
and then tax them again, because like that's just not even. Amazon and Jeff Bezos should not have anywhere near the kinds of money that they're spending for like
Right.
ballrooms for the
He'll never
president
spend
and
that
owning
money in
towns.
his lifetime. And there's so much to be said about that. And I would like to, because I'm so on board with you here and with the time that we have left, I am really concerned that we are getting to a place, given my recent no, we're not getting to a place. I think we're there with my recent candidate experience, especially for the upper level congressional offices. They suck so much air out of the conversation that people just don't have as high awareness on the lower ballot races, which is just a shame as well. But what I am especially seeing congressional level is, you know what, if you don't have $1 million, or if you don't have a way to get $1 million or several $1 million, then don't bother running. That
Right.
is insane. Andres, what the fuck do we do with that? I'm worried. I think I have some answers. There's not just one answer. And if we are generalizing, the answer is like money out of politics. And it's more complicated than just that phrase. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we have to practice what we preach.
Mm,
And a large part of that, which we're seeing happen in more campaigns, I even think of yours actually as a great example of it,
thank
as
you.
well as a Cat who's running for, I forget how to say her last
House
name.
Rep in Illinois, right? Kat
Yes. Yep.
Abugazala. Pardon if I did not pronounce that correctly.
Yes. So, both of you had these very volunteer and like, root focused
People centered.
campaigns.
Yeah.
And then, Kat going that kind of next step as well in terms of turning the campaign into a mutual aid hub. Like
So cool.
once the race took on this national amount of fundraising tenor,
Mm-hmm.
she was like, "Oh, we have enough to start doing
Let's keep
mutual aid
going.
hub distributions and kind of
Yeah.
grow this out. So I think, for candidate wise, that's something that people need to, I think, reward when we're seeing it. I think the right way to do it is the way that you have done it, Jax, in terms of like start working in different kind of campaign events and work your way up, because as you get that kind of name recognition, you'll be able to do bigger and bigger things with that. But you start with a mindset of like, I can do a lot with just a little, so I don't need, the $20 million check or something like that.
Not for county commissioner, my God. Come on, man.
No. Yeah. Yeah. You can actually set a realistic understanding of what that takes, so that when, you are running larger campaigns, you can recognize when to draw that line of like, yes, six figures will get us a nice, like, chief of staff and this and that and whatever. But like, I don't need 1 million, right? We can spin that into other things. And then I think in terms of policy, like that's where I wish this like oligarchy tour that happened was pushing towards, and we're seeing some of it in terms of like banning insider trading and stuff like that. But there's so many policy things. Like, what would it look like to tell news stations that anyone who's running for any office, you get this much political time to run ads, and not a penny more, and they must all be charged at cost. You wouldn't have people fundraising, tens of millions to make these ridiculous ads and flood them on every single platform, right?
That's a big chunk of where the money goes. Yep.
Right. So, but that's legislation, and that's going to take time. So I think in the meantime, finding candidates that walk the walk, so that when they get into the
Yes.
legislature and you build that bench, when the number is there and the votes are there, being able to say, okay, now we need to actually codify this so that it's not just like a virtue signal type of thing, or like something that you do out of the goodness of your heart. It's like, if you're running for office, these are the things that you can collect money for, or, like a campaign should be guaranteed to run no more than 100,000. Period.
Wouldn't that be nice, man?
Yeah.
That's an
Then
ideal
then
world to me.
you have an ideal goal, like, if the state government does like these matching programs, suddenly they don't have to be hyper
Yes.
competitive, because if
Right.
10 programs did a candidate fund and gave 10 people $10,000, like that's a good chunk on the way for all of them to hit their max. So things like that. But the only way you're getting there is you have to codify things to make sure that the costs are capped at this amount.
Right. Intentional policy around, mitigating the harm that we all recognize when it comes to money and politics, right? If you're listening to this show, you've probably heard of Citizens United and what that did, the negative impacts around like corporate money in politics, right? And PACs and dark money and all these really what I would say nefarious layers to push back against when it comes to this influence. And so I really appreciate that. I was Kat is inspirational to me, watching her from afar as we were kind of, on a campaign journey timeline simultaneously. And I don't mind roasting myself. We're both losers. We both didn't make it through the primary. And what I see from her, and I will, speaking for myself, is like, and what? Like, we went through the system, we did our thing, we learned a lot from it, and we're still here. We're going to keep going because that's what, rebels fighting for freedom do.
Yep, absolutely. And
Awesome.
I just love the looking beyond what's next. Like, we can't be disappointed when something doesn't pan out. I mean, we need to take that time for ourselves and reflect.
Feel
So
your
like,
feels.
sit in it. However, we need to also keep like a North Star and know like either way there will be another day. The path continues, and these things will
Absolutely.
take time.
Truly. And I will open heartedly continue to embrace my North Star, which was North Star before this campaign, during, and always will be, which is being of service to my community. Like, to me, my words, like, that's how I can show love. That's how I can practice and bring more love to our world, which boy, I think it's really important to show love and just recognize the dignity of humanity, right? And not lose sight that these policies, these numbers, these fundraising figures, at the end of the day, like, this should be about serving humans to the best of our ability as possible. And, that's part of why I ran, and that really worried that I don't see folks in elected office as much as I would like, whose North Star is public service as opposed to politics, which I do consider them different. And I was listening to one of your episodes with Representative Breonna Tattone, right? Such a good one from earlier this year. Shout out, go see that on Sithty Minutes. Go listen. And I heard her say the same damn thing, which I'm a public servant, not a politician. And fuck yeah, that's the people we need in these spaces.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Well, I so appreciate your time, Andres, and I feel like I said your name a lot, but I really like saying your name because Espanol, man. So,
Oh,
and I want to ask kind of how we wrap up the show. We try to do a balance of things because we talk about some pretty, serious subject matter. And so we always say for our wrap up here, like, what's good in your life? What's good in the hood? Do you have some calls to action? Please feel free, plug that website for the effort that you mentioned with regard to the legal profession. Share with the people.
yeah, absolutely. So personal things happening in life. I'm actually graduating with a master's this weekend. So
Oh, bravo.
yeah, that is, it's like a weird thing to like internalize or to kind of
Yeah.
like reflect on. But Latinos with degrees of any kind is like we're basically mythical unicorns out here. So we exist. We're out there.
Hell yeah.
There is a pathway. So that's been kind of what I've been stewing on in my head in terms of like getting excited or feeling like, the imposter syndrome can kick in and you're like, do I deserve, like, I did this, but
Yeah.
I really do it? So now I'm
Just
mentally kind of
operate
hyping myself up.
good. Yeah. Operate with the
Yeah.
confidence of a mediocre white man, my friend.
Right.
Just
Right.
like own it. You earned it.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And ooh, I did want to mention, so this is fun. I'm presuming you may have plans, or maybe you celebrate in a certain way. We have May the 4th Day coming up this Monday, and then shout out to Cinco de Mayo this Tuesday. Que viva la raza. Any fun things, good stuff you got planned in those realms?
Unfortunately, my May the 4th work will have to, or celebration will have to be in the evening. Session is almost over, but
Oh,
that means that
right.
I have to be in and around the Capitol more often than not, and Monday happens to be one of those days for a
Yeah.
lot of important bills going through committee. So, yeah, I'm gonna be like suited up, but I have like a little green leather bracelet, and the clasp for it is like a lightsaber. So
Oh, hell
maybe
yeah.
I'll try and sneak in some kind of like a gear and stuff or nods to Star Wars. But for
Yeah.
Cinco de Mayo, we're my wife is Guatemalan and Salvadorian, and I'm Venezuelan and Colombian. So we might just make a festive kind of meal for the week, but we're very kind of sensitive to the traditions of our different countries because we
Yes.
we
Latinos
both
are not a
have,
monolith.
yeah, it's like we both have our own split, and like even our cultures, like, if we ever have free time, ask me about the differences in key meals for both of those countries because there's like huge fights in both of our countries that
Yup.
we are half and half of, about how we do food traditions, like, different Independence Days, etc. So
Yes.
yeah, we'll, might zhuzh it up a little bit. We're we're gonna try and have some kind of fish for our meal next week. So maybe one of those days we like to buy like a big fillet and then portion it out for the week.
Cost
So
cutting,
maybe one of
baby.
those days we'll have like a nice little taco mix or something that's got a little more uh, Latin flair in it, but we'll see.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that. As a nod to solidarity with your Chicano counterparts here, and the Mexican American vibe that is connected to Cinco de Mayo. Happy reminder there, like we said, there is a lot of beautiful nuance and complexity around Latino and Latinidad. That's what I prefer to use these days because it's all just a construct anyway. Um,
Pop
so
off.
right. So we're gonna get you back on another episode, and we'll talk about Latinidad and the amazing discourse around all the different food entrees, because Latin America has a lot to fucking say. So that said, here's what I will wrap up. Episodes of Justice with Jax are recorded as a member of the Studio 809 podcast collective at the Next Us community co-working space in downtown Colorado Springs. Remember to ask yourself two questions. Who's telling your story? And how are you being the change you want to see in the world today? This is Justice with Jax, signing off.